Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mount & Blade Bannerlord Mods of the Week. Today we talk about Week 4, meaning that the game has now seen its first full month, and there have been some very cool mods throughout this period. In a few days I will make a top mods of the month video, much like how I would do with Arma, but for now, let's take a look at some mods that are worth mentioning this week. There have been some great additions, though many are very small touches that go a long way in improving the overall experience and immersion of the game, which I think a lot of you will like. Before we talk about the first mods on the list though, I would like to remind you guys to also check out some of my other YouTube channels you can find in the description down below. I have a Star Wars Battlefront focused channel, a gaming review channel, and several Let's Play channels as well. If you like what you see, then please subscribe to those channels as it helps me out a lot. And now, without further ado, let's get to the mods. For the first mod of this week's showcase, we have another mod that stood high on the charts of popular releases. The Firelord Mod spices things up and gives us even more fiery goodies to play with besides the arrows. Unfortunately for this first mod, there will be no moving footage. I don't know why, but when I wanted to record the footage with this mod, it always crashed, even if I changed to earlier or newer versions. All other mods still worked fine, so I'm not too sure what caused this, maybe a reshade that I applied or something, but unfortunately for this first mod, there will be screenshots only. For in the second week, we received multiple fire arrow mods that added the cool visual spectacle of having flame arrows in battle. Those are also represented here, but Firelord adds cool new additions like flaming melee weapons as well. Flaming swords, flaming spears, and everything in between add awesome and epic new visuals to the combat already. Again, playing this during a night battle and seeing your flaming sword in all its glory is very intimidating. Now of course, it might not be very realistic, but I think the fun and power it brings is enough to at least give it a try. But it's not just the weapons, but also the fact that there's a burning mechanic and burning damage that is really cool addition. You can set enemies on fire with these sizzling weapons, which is really awesome and kind of feels Game of Thrones-ish, where of course a few also had the fire swords, which they used to burn their enemies. The fact that this mod goes beyond just the weapons and adds some new mechanics is very much appreciated, and therefore alone justifies, in my opinion, the downloading of this mod. Now for the next mod, we are not going to deviate all that much from the earlier said burning effect, but instead this time it is a mod that adds a bleeding effect to the troops. If one were to look at films like Braveheart, confrontations with enemies were often short and swift, and battles were decided with one or two swings. If not, a limb would be cut off, or deep cuts would result in the victim losing a lot of blood. With this mod, you can add this to your battles. And the cool thing is that you can customize how much of an effect you want it to have during the chaos. Whenever you do damage, a percentage of that damage is then converted to bleeding damage. The percentage amount can be adjusted accordingly. What is also cool is that you can adjust the minimum of damage an attack needs to do before the bleeding effect actually starts. That way, you can have a weak scraping attack not actually result in the enemy or yourself bleeding from it. And you can also adjust if the bleeding effect stacks, if you land, for example, multiple hits successfully. Thereby, it's usually game over if you land 2 good hits, which is of course more realistic, but it can all be changed to your liking and playstyle. I think it adds some cool immersiveness and also challenge in that you have to be even more careful not to get hit too many times. It also will make arrows way more effective since their damage will have more lasting effects. A really cool mod that goes a long way despite its humble size. For the next mod on the list, we have another small mod that, in my opinion, goes a long way for making the game a bit more immersive. The command system with Bannerlord is fairly robust, and having the ability to form various formations and strategies is really cool with your own character giving those orders pretty convincingly. And seeing all those hundreds of characters start to move as one after you give out one of those orders is of course a sight to behold. But just a small detail is missing, and that is the responsiveness of your troops. Whenever you give an order or select armies in games like Total War, you always get a small response. We often look over that, but it does breathe a bit more life into the troops and be just a tad bit more convincing. That is the case now too with Bannerlord. Having all those troops cheer or yell whenever you order them to pull out really adds something cool that, now that you've heard it, you can't really do without anymore. It's also really cool to repeat a charging order right before the two armies meet to have that awesome Avengers Endgame or Braveheart feeling of two armies running at each other while screaming at the top of their lungs. It is of course difficult to portray this mod again with just imagery since it's an audio focused mod, so for the next few seconds I will showcase some of the responses of the troops.
Fall back! Halt! Charge! Charge!
Then we arrive at the next mod on our list, which is the Better Projectiles mod. There might be some out there who don't like the regular mesh that is used whenever archers are bestowing death upon one another. Instead of actually seeing the arrow, the illusion of speed and blur gets achieved by portraying them as large sticks rather than arrows. This mod replaces that mesh with the arrow model that it has whenever it is still. Thereby, you have much greater detail and the projectile does indeed actually look like an arrow. Now there is a downside to this though in my opinion. Though I cannot argue that the projectiles themselves look indeed better, the feeling of hundreds of arrows being fired at you gets a bit lost with this mod. The bigger vanilla projectiles have the function to really get that feeling of a wall of arrows across, and this mod makes them tinier and sharper, making them easier to miss. Don't get me wrong, you can still see the arrows if you look closely, but it's only for a few frames and it's difficult to compromise exactly how many arrows are fired at you. The Flame Arrows mod still portrays this the best, as every individual arrow is clearly visible due to the flames. But for those who want a bit more realism, this Better Projectile mod might be your thing. I can definitely say that the models themselves look better, but I do hope this mod will be updated to let the arrows have a bit more oomph when it comes to their delivery. Next up on our list is the Realistic Weapon Collision mod, and though this is again one of those mods that might only seem to change something very slightly, the impact is really cool. Though I do really like the combat mechanics of Bannerlord, it never has felt as a super realistic fighting sim. Something like Kingdom Come Deliverance comes then at least a bit closer. Part of this is the unreactiveness of some of your attacks or animations that cut right through the enemies without a real sense of feedback. This mod really emphasizes on having the characters react in a more realistic way depending on where they are hit by your weapon. Instead of cutting through the enemies, the animation actually properly stops whenever it makes contact and bounces off the surface in a believable way. I would also definitely recommend having your ragdoll option turned on if you use this mod, as it will make it even more satisfying. Seeing an enemy run at you, then being hit in the neck in a realistic looking way, and then seeing its body fall while its legs still give out due to the sprinting is very cool and convincing. Of what I understand, it is a bit difficult to combine with other collision mods, so you could still be faced with cluttered up enemy hordes, but it is the distinction you have to make whether you want a more pleasant feel of combat or troop placement. All in all, another small mod that is definitely worth your time. And with that, we come to another end of this mods of the week. Honestly, in terms of size or what it changes, this week's mod might be amongst the smallest ones yet, but I think they all hold their own in really adding something to your Bannerlord experience. The Firelord is definitely the more crazy one out there, but the others simply add more immersiveness to an otherwise already very cool game. In all honesty, I think the first month of Bannerlord has been excellent, with some really surprising and cool mods that were released in such a short time span. As I said, I will upload a video where I talk about the top mods of the month, and don't forget to let me know if a mod comes out that I should definitely cover in this video series. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you all next week.